But no, what I really like about the Lions is Deuce Staley going there, because we've seen, time and time again, Deuce Staley actually produce top-end running backs that might not have been top-end talents. So I'm very, very excited for the whole Deuce Staley experience over there. But what are we doing talking running backs? We got Matt Harmon on.
That's a good question.
No, we're sitting there talking about, what we wouldn't, or what we do without reception perception, and we'd end up being the Lions. And that's how we got on the conversation in the first place. So I love it. I love it. We got an interesting show sheet on here. We got some fun things we want to talk about. We actually have Jeff joining us too. Jeff.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. You guys ready to kick this episode off?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Chase Vernon.
What's going on, guys? Welcome on into, another episode. That's right, of Fantasy Intervention, coming at you hot and heavy, ready to take over your Wednesday night, of course, just like we do every Wednesday. Absolutely love it, because guess what? We are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Matt Harmon. What's going on, Matt? How we doing?
Guys, thanks so much for having me. We were just talking, when we hopped on here, what an exciting time it is in the NFL right now. I mean, even in a normal year, free agency, I think, like, if you don't love free agency, the rumors, the things that get kicked around, the dream scenarios, just all of the possibilities and potential, even if those are hopes that are dashed in a few years, like, if you don't love this time of year and just talking about roster building in general, I'm not sure that you really love football. Like, this is such an awesome time. And this year, especially, with the salary cap ramifications and every other wrench that's kind of thrown into the process, it's going to be an even more exciting time. So I'm happy to be here and kick it around with you a bit tonight.
Dude, I love it. Like, this is amazing to have you on. Big fan of your work. Of course, the reception perception and all the work you do over there at Yahoo. Been absolutely amazing. So, real quick, you want to tell us where we can find you? What kind of content you're producing, and plug whatever you want.
Yeah, of course, you can find all my work on Yahoo Sports, doing the podcast every now and again in the off season. I know we got a Dream Free Agents Landing Spot episode coming out tomorrow on Thursday. Everybody's doing one of those. You got to, but also they're fun, right? All of those will be smashed to pieces in just a few days when we actually find out some landing spots. We'll probably get all of our predictions wrong, but who cares? It's the offseason. Doesn't really matter. So that'll be fun. I know I'm talking to Colts running back Nyheim Hines on that episode as well. So definitely check that out. That was a great conversation. That one's already in the books. He was a gem. He brought up Carson Wentz, which is always nice when you're talking to a player and the move hasn't been, it's not, this is a weird time of year, right? Because like we've got the Wentz trade, the Stafford trade, but those aren't really official yet, because the league year hasn't started. So when he brought it up, I'm like, all right, good to go. He's talking about it. We're talking about Carson Wentz right now. Let's fire the cannons. So that was a good conversation. And of course, all my written work is there, and reception perception, that's TBD, not TBD, but to be announced, where that's going to be coming up this year. Changes in the book. So it's a pretty exciting time here at Harmon Corp, I guess, if you can put it that way.
Is it set an LLC yet?
Not, again, we'll see.
Is it a corporate? Okay.
I know a guy that can do that. So
I was gonna say, now I feel like with Jeff here, I'm like I'm infringing on your territory. I shouldn't have made jokes about such terms. Now I just look like a goon.
No, we actually just got an LLC earlier this week, so ours actually went through for Fantasy Intervention. Very excited about that. We announced a few of the partners in this, and ready to take off. So make sure you guys,
Awesome.
while you're here, hit subscribe on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasyintervention. You guys can check out all of our content at fantasyintervention.com, all of our work. You guys can also pick up some cool swag, which we get from Vernon Global, right? Fantasy Intervention swag, tees, hats, sweatshirts, all that fun stuff. And then Jeff, what's going on, man? Where can we find you? What do you do?
I am a little bit of all over. You can find me on Twitter at @4whomjbelltolls. You can find me doing some work with Fantasy Pros, obviously with co-owner of Fantasy Intervention, helping behind the scenes and trying to put some stuff out front too, and a little bit with Going for Two. So you can find me all around, and I'm so happy that Matt is able to join us. I know that today is a day of mourning for him. My beloved Bills, you can see behind me, have cut John Smokey Brown, but he'll bounce back, and I appreciate that you are working through it and able to join us.
Yeah. Tough day, of course. We are flying the black flag for John Brown for now, but like you mentioned, this is just it was a procedural move, right? We got to make that happen because the cap is squeezed, and now we'll see. There's so many receivers on the market, and now he just joins that crowded space, but it'll be fun to track where he ends up.
I was a little shocked that it was only 182.5 is what number they came up with, because I thought it was going to be significantly more than that by 5-6 million. So seeing it hit 182.5 is a little bit shocking and very detrimental to certain teams. Like we're seeing with the Saints right now. You know, we're going to end up seeing with the Eagles, however they decide to get out of that. Like the Saints, they can restructure and they can keep kicking stuff back and stuff, but the Eagles are like really like in a rough spot. And I don't think people realize that because the Saints are just in a giant spotlight, but the Eagles are actually in a really tough spot. So, go ahead.
I have no idea what the Eagles are going to do. Yeah, like you said, there are some answers that you can point to on the Saints. Although I can't believe the Saints just put a franchise tag on Marcus Williams. That I didn't see coming. Not because he's not a good player, like he's a good safety, but
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, and you're already the most over the cap by any team in the NFL. So that was surprising. I was trying to explain the salary cap and comp picks to one of my buddies who's a big football fan, but is not quite into the weeds as much as we are, in the office when Michael Scott asks Oscar to explain it to him like he's 5. And, we went into some scenarios there, and my buddy's like, yeah, I guess I've always thought of the salary cap as like, you're having one too many drinks tonight you're going to pay for it later. Right. But it's in the moment. In this year's cap, you're not thinking about it. You just kick some of that stuff into tomorrow, into next year. Like, that's a good way of thinking about it. The Saints just always seem to be that person that's always got a Gatorade the next morning to get through that pain that you thought was going to be coming. They keep on doing that. They keep on doing it. So it'll be interesting to see what flavors they pull out this year. The Eagles, on the other hand, I don't know how they're going to get out of feeling the hurt. And that is going to be a weird-looking roster next year for sure.
I don't know if the Saints actually have like a Gatorade ready. I think it's more like the hair of the dog ready. They got bottled Jameson sitting right there on the nightstand.
Keep on drinking.
It back. What are we going to do today? Let's just get drunk. We were drunk yesterday. Let's just do it again today. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this episode. We got a lot of fantasy football, I guess, implications with everything that's going on with free agency and these cap situations, of course. So let's go ahead and dive into those. And I guess you tweeted about a true wide receiver 1, or the first wide receivers are off the board, and Golladay being right on the fringe. So what did you mean by that? Like, what's your thought process?
Yeah, basically to me, coming into this free agency process, to me, it was always Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin on a tier by themselves, because I think it's really no question that Allen Robinson is that guy. He is a true alpha, number 1 wide receiver. You can build your entire passing game around him. The Bears basically do build their entire passing game around him. The Jacksonville Jaguars built their only successful passing game around him from a few seasons ago. Obviously, they haven't had much success since then. Like, he is that guy. I think that's undisputed. He was clearly, to me, the top player on the market. Now, the Chris Godwin situation is a little more interesting because we haven't necessarily seen him be that alpha, in a way that they've got Mike Evans. This past year, they had Antonio Brown. But I believe strongly that he's that player. I believe strongly that if another team signed him, or whatever, if at any point he could function as a team's true number 1, I think he's a stud. I don't think there's any weakness in his game. Now, Kenny Golladay, I think, is basically what I mean there is he's right on the fringe of being that player. I think, coming into 2020, when you looked at the 3 previous seasons, he had taken strong, steady steps of improvement every single way. You know, when you look at reception perception, he's a guy that when he came into the league wasn't a great separator, wasn't like, you know, Kelvin. I think people talk about him as if he's still like a Kelvin Benjamin type of separator. Like, give me a break. You know, he's not like that type of player. Obviously, he's great on contested catches, but that might be the strength of his game. But he got better as a separator basically by, 10 percentage points every single year. That's pretty, or within the course of 3 years, that's really steady improvement and not necessarily something you always see happen with these guys. So I think he was prepared to take that jump potentially in 2020 to being the Robinson Godwin level player. Unfortunately, obviously with all the injuries, we didn't really see that fully come to fruition, but that could easily happen with his next team in 2021. So that's basically what I mean is he's right on the fringe of that discussion. But I think we just haven't fully seen him be that player just yet, basically all because of the injury issues last year.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where he's actually going to go and what he can actually do, because some spots actually scare me. Like, when they talk about Jacksonville, like, I don't like that landing spot, not at all. But maybe somewhere like Arizona could make sense, as he could be more of a deep threat type person. But his route tree is getting so much better. Jeff, do you have like an ideal landing spot for Golladay?
We saw Miami talked about him today. Obviously, I don't think we want him hooking up with Tua right now. Maybe Tua develops into that guy. We're still waiting to see where Deshaun Watson lands. If he were to land in Miami and all of a sudden you start stacking up Golladay in Miami, maybe we saw Aaron Jones in Miami, maybe there's a little bit of a redeem team or the Heatles from back in the day gathering up in Miami and ready to go.
Matt, do you have an ideal landing spot? I know you just did the Dream Team episode, right? So did you have a spot for Golladay?
Well, we're recording it tomorrow, so obviously I do not prep a day ahead. Let me tell you that. Who's never writing that show sheet? This guy, absolutely not. So I'll figure that out about an hour before we tape. No, but I think when you look at teams that could use a guy like Golladay, I think he could honestly make every offense better. If you're thinking of like a dream spot from potential standpoint, even if from a fantasy angle, it would definitely throw a wrench into the equation. I have no idea. This is another team that I have no idea how they'd make it work from a salary cap perspective. But we talk about Marvin Jones reuniting with Matthew Stafford in LA with the Rams. I think Kenny Golladay would be perfect there because that would give them an X receiver that they don't really have. Cooper Kupp's not that guy. Robert Woods is not that guy. Neither one of those guys are vertical threats. I think last year you could point to a lot of problems with Los Angeles offense, but I think one of the biggest ones was they just had no juice in the passing game. Cooper Kupp is a tertiary like slot receiver. Robert Woods is that kind of gadget flanker guy. You didn't have anyone. You had to get rid of Brandon Cooks because of the salary implications, but they really missed that the guy who could take the top off the defense. I think that Golladay could be that guy for them, but it's probably too much of a stretch. Maybe a more realistic one, but again, probably not within this team's style is Indianapolis. I think the Colts could really use someone with Carson Wentz on the outside to sort of take that vertical presence. Michael Pittman is a player I really like, but yes, their depth chart. Now I see. I really like Pittman too, but you just look at the rest of their depth chart, man. It's kind of ghastly. Is Paris Campbell ever going to be able to stay healthy? I think T.Y. Hilton's a free agent, and he also looked, kind of cooked last year to me. So I think that would be a good spot for Golladay, but it certainly would throw a few question marks to the Michael Pittman breakout next year, which I would love to see.
You know who's actually has the least amount of salary cap space right now? It's not the New Orleans Saints. It's actually the Rams. The Saints passed by the Rams today.
Good for you, New Orleans. Yeah, so that Rams landing spot with Kenny Golladay probably not going to happen. Although doubting the Rams has proven to be not a fruitful endeavor of late.
But he could still end up in LA because the Chargers, if the Chargers were to move out Mike Williams' contract, Golladay would be great pairing with Keenan Allen working underneath, and you develop with Justin Herbert. That'd be pretty interesting too.
By the way,
I've been saying that, that's a sneaky team that could add a wide receiver because of what you said, like Mike Williams. And I think Mike Williams is a good player, but Kenny Golladay is basically the souped up, more consistent, better version of what you get out of Mike Williams. And Kenny Golladay, he had injury problems last year, but like Mike Williams is always banged up because nobody sacrifices their body on contested catches better than Mike Williams. And those catches, They look pretty, but man, like I said, you are sacrificing your body over and over again. So, maybe the Ravens could get involved. I know a lot of people want to see him there, but it sounds like they don't want to chase that type of player. And I also don't love the stylistic fit of. I think Lamar would have thrived with a guy like Chris Godwin, go over the middle, really block, but obviously that's not going to happen. So I don't necessarily love that landing spot either.
Yeah, I mean, you saw Willie Snead get somewhat, a decent amount of volume, but he couldn't do anything with the ball because he's not a good football player. So, it's debatable as to or if I actually want to see a player from the, end up on the Ravens when it comes to wide receivers, because it still stings, but I do encourage, by the way, anybody in the chat that has questions for Matt Harmon, please go ahead and put them in there. We're not going to field every single one, but we will field a decent amount of those to get those questions answered. So if you have questions for Matt Harmon, please leave them in the chat. All right. So on to the next topic. Is there a favorite wide receiver 2 on the market right now? Like, do you have a name guy, like maybe Will Fuller or something along those lines?
Yeah, so I actually just put out an article today on Yahoo basically saying, putting these guys into groups, putting them into tiers. As we talked about, I think that Galladay is in that second tier. If we're going to still include Robinson and Godwin in free agents, because I still think Robinson could get traded. I thought those guys were on a tier all on their own. Then the second tier, I actually think I put Kenny Galladay and Will Fuller in that fringe wide receiver 1 tier, because here's the deal with Will Fuller, man. He was awesome last year. I mean, he played and was used and was deployed like a true alpha number 1 receiver. But first year he's ever done it. First year he's ever been asked to do it, obviously, because DeAndre Hopkins was there all that time. The PED thing does give me like a small bit of hesitation, right? But like, who knows how to really count that. The point is, he was awesome last year. I think he could land in a spot and really thrive as well. So I don't necessarily know that I want to call him a number 2. Now, the guys I grouped as like good quality number 2 receivers are Juju, Corey Davis, and Curtis Samuel. And I think folks know who's my favorite pick of the bunch there is definitely Curtis Samuel, right? Like, because I think he's a perfect second contract buy to me, because I also think he's going to be the cheapest of those 3 guys, because with Corey Davis, the draft pedigree is going to follow him. I think Davis is a really good, rugged number 2 receiver. Like, if you guys just watched the Titans offense last year and weren't familiar with the players, and you just, someone told you, hey, look, one of these receivers was drafted 5th overall. The other is like a rugged second-round pick that blocks really well, is good on contested catches, does kind of all the dirty work. You would think A.J. Brown was that top 5 pick and Corey Davis was that second-round guy. But obviously we know that's not really how things have happened. So I think Davis would be a great fit as a number 2 alongside an established number 1. But I think Curtis Samuel is going to be cheaper. I think he's like the perfect second contract buy. You just look at the receivers that have been values in free agency over the last few years. It's been John Brown with the Buffalo Bills. It's been Cole Beasley with the Buffalo Bills. Guys that were sort of the third or down the depth chart with their previous team, and then were elevated into new creative roles. Even Robert Woods, formerly of the Bills with the LA Rams, that's been a successful signing. Marvin Jones with the Detroit Lions, another one that, it's not the number 1 guy, but it's a player who's elevated from a former role into a higher new one. I think Curtis Samuel can be that guy, not just as a gadget player either, but I think he can, we know based on what I've done with reception perception, he's a really good route runner, can separate at all levels. I would be excited if he lands in the right spot across from a good number 1 receiver.
That's interesting. I mean, a spot that makes sense could be Washington, but that's actually where I have Juju Smith-Schuster going as of right now. It makes sense for Green Bay. There are so many different landing spots. Jeff, do you have a landing spot for Curtis Samuel?
I thought the Jets. He's a Brooklyn guy. They're bringing LaFleur over from San Francisco. I wonder if using him on some of those things that they use Debo, but also using him downfield. I'm an Ohio State fan. I saw him be a running back in college, and obviously last year we saw that hybrid versatility. But at the same time, he can get downfield. He can make plays. And I think an offense like the Jets that is desperately in need of playmakers could really unlock his full true potential and go home.
That's true. That's interesting. That's a good take. So, Jeff, you had a question that you had in the show sheet.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and launch that one off?
Absolutely. So I know Deontay Johnson is one of your big guys to break out this year. Obviously, anytime that he's mentioned, people are going to talk about the drops. I saw back on your blog on Backyard Banter, you had put up a piece about the negativity bias and drops, how drops are such a small percentage of plays, but in our mind, they stand out so broadly. So right now I'm seeing a lot of scouting reports come out about these rookie wide receivers, and people always mention the drops. How have you addressed that negativity in your mind, but how do you recommend people go about and looking at the whole picture instead of just that little bitty portion?
Yeah, well, number one, we just talked about Will Fuller, and I think he's a perfect example of the unsustainability of drops as a metric. Like we think about them, like people still think, man, Will Fuller, he drops the ball too much. That guy's like never had drop problems in the pros. He's maybe had a couple big ones in big games, but again, they stick to your mind because you already had that bias about him as a college player, but he's never been, like a problematic. He's never turned into Ted Ginn. Like people legit thought Will Fuller was going to be Ted Ginn because he was fast and couldn't catch or whatever. And even Ted Ginn, like hell, he ended up having a long career. He was never the guy that he was drafted to be, but he helped some teams, New Orleans, Carolina, occasionally here and there. So I think that's the biggest thing to me is that they get overweighted in people's minds. There's not a lot of sustainability year over year with the drops metric. And the biggest thing to me, like you mentioned in that piece, yeah, it's a super big letdown when you're watching. And I mean, trust me, as a Deontay Johnson guy, every time the damn Steelers were going to be on a primetime game, not only was it like, great, I have to watch the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger in this crusty form of his career, but also like I got to put up with, Deontay Johnson banging a slant route off his hand. And it's just like, it's killer because then I pick up because this is just a horrible thing that I do to myself. I pick up the phone, scroll the timeline, read all the Deontay Johnson sucks tweets. And the reality is, if you're getting that many targets, the team and the quarterback thinks you're good. Targets aren't earned stat. We sit here and we act as if like, oh, this guy's just getting a lot of targets because it's a coincidence or something. No, they're getting targets because they're good. That's why teams end up throwing these guys the ball. Obviously, Deontay, was pulled from a few games here and there. It just really doesn't matter from a fantasy angle. It doesn't really matter that much from an NFL angle unless they consistently are happening in big moments. The player gets in their head. But if you're the biggest thing is if you are making plays that make the drops worth living with, teams are going to keep you on the field. You're a good player, and usually the drops will eventually just fade out of your game. And even if they don't, it really doesn't matter that much. So the thing is, I'm always going to ask, like, what is the player doing well enough to a point that we can live with the drops? I think Johnson is a guy who certainly brings enough to the table that you're worth living with those drops. And there are people that have had drops issues like Greg Little. Remember him, the Bengals receiver out of UNC? People are like, yeah, he washed out of the league because he dropped the ball too much. He washed out of the league because he couldn't do anything that made drops worth living with. Guys like Brandon Marshall, Terrell Owens, even DK Metcalf right now at this point, they drop the ball a lot, but they're doing a lot of good things in order to get those targets to begin with.
Dude, Dante Moncrief, I just can't get him out of my head. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's like Steelers dropped the ball a lot. I don't know why that is. But no, I'll never forget the 4-drop game where Dante Moncrief just had him in DFS.
That was tough.
And he dropped it over and over and over, like in the end zone. It was terrible. And he wasn't even covered because he was so good. He had so much speed in order to get open. But let's go ahead and answer a question real quick from the audience. We have Cooter Doodle coming in.
Oh, my God.
And we need to know, Matt Harmon, if you do milk or cereal first.
Who are these lunatics out there that are putting the milk in first?
Cooter, I love you. But you're a lunatic.
Who are these folks? Like,
this is a real thing.
I know. I can't believe it's a real thing. Like, I went my entire life putting the cereal in and then putting the milk. Like, the cereal is the point. You're eating cereal because of the cereal. Like, what if and maybe you're just so good at measuring things out. And I guess at this point in life, like, you should be. I'm definitely not trusting. Maybe I'm the idiot over here. But, like, you put the milk in first, you could have all this milk. And then it's like, well, how do I match that with cereal? I don't know. It just makes sense. The cereal is the highlight. Get it in there first. Throw the milk on top. I mean, I guess it really doesn't matter. But to me, maybe this is just my own bias. That's always how I've done it. That's how I was raised. That's how my parents did it in this house. We put the cereal in first.
Oh man, it's amazing. But Cooter Doodle, if you don't follow her, by the way, Matt, she's hilarious. She's actually our co-host on Wednesdays. But she does all sorts of stuff that is literally going to make your skin crawl, and she puts it on video while she's discussing fantasy football. It literally will drive you insane, but she is definitely worth the follow.
That's a good brand. That's a good brand.
Very good. She's very funny. So,
have you ever put peanut butter on a sandwich with your hand? Because it's stuff like that that'll drive you insane.
Oh my god, I'm not a huge peanut butter guy, so I know it's a bad take. I get it. It's one of those things like everybody's
I'm not here to judge.
No, but you can be here to judge. It's fine. Like at this point in my life, if there's, someone gives me a cookie and it's like, there's peanut butter in the cookie, I'm going to eat the cookie. I'm an adult. I'm not a child, right? Like I'm fine, but it's cookie, right? Or like, it's who's going to say no to that? Like I can have something that has peanut butter in it. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is disgusting, but I'm just never going to seek out peanut butter. Also, it's a whole nother thing.
All right, so we'll do one more question. We'll get back to the show sheet. Hey, fellas, do the Packers add a notable free agent or draft another quarterback in the first few rounds? You guys are really good at these questions. Killing it. So
I'm trying not to get my hopes up, right? Is this just going to be another year where we get a disaster of really no additions to the offense? And I think the Packers will look at it like last year as confirmation bias too, right? Had a good year, went to the NFC Championship again. We don't need, a better wide receiver. So I'll be just pleasantly surprised if they add somebody of note, but I'm not expecting it.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is like Aaron Rodgers was like best friends with Alan Lazard. Like they spent Thanksgiving together, so they had a connection. Like they actually had this, I guess, legitimate connection, for lack of a better word. So anyways, like sitting there and looking at it, like I feel like the Packers just felt comfortable with Alan Lazard being there when Alan Lazard got hurt and magnified the situation. But they just spent draft picks on Equanimeous St. Brown. They spent draft picks on, how many different wide receivers in the first 3 or 4 rounds? Or so?
Scantling.
Yeah, Scantling.
MBS,
it's like they're not good at drafting wide receivers outside of Devontae Adams. That's evident. So I don't know that they actually will draft, a wide receiver, of course. Now, they're not going to draft a quarterback. Love is there. So that's going to happen. Now, when it comes to notable free agents, a lot of slot receivers have come into the conversation. Is there a certain slot receiver that you think they could add, or actually somebody that will help us jump into our next topic with Marvin Jones Jr., who could stretch the field for him and is a little bit more reliable with his hands?
Yeah, I think they'd be a great place for a Curtis Samuel type, a number 2 wide receiver, and can do, some of the jet sweeps and stuff, some of the fakes that are the motions that are such huge staples of that Matt LaFleur offense that they don't really have a guy. Tyler Ervin's a player who's gotten a lot of burn for them, just literally on those plays, but it's Tyler Ervin, he's not a guy that you really respect. There's some potential there for Curtis Samuel to be that guy while also adding a field stretching element and being just a solid number 2 receiver. I think that would be a great spot for him. They're still $9 million over the cap right now. They can make some moves. They can cut Preston Smith. They can restructure Aaron Rodgers' contract. Like that might get them to a point where they're in a safe place. But I don't know that I see, I don't know that I see a free agent landing here. I'd love to be pleasantly surprised. But maybe they're a team that goes for sort of lower on the radar, like a Nelson Aguilar type. Aguilar was kind of sneaky good last year. Like, if you still think Nelson Aguilar stinks, I don't know if you were watching the games last year, because he's another guy, definitely drops the ball a decent amount. But last year he was a vertical playmaker for the Raiders. He was not used in the same pop gun slot style that he was for the Philadelphia Eagles. A 15-yard average depth of target. He was somehow unlocked as a vertical receiver by Derek Carr of all quarterbacks. So maybe they go into that level of free agent, but I could see them sitting out sort of the early portion, the Corey Davises, the Juju, the Curtis Samuel. I don't know that I see them end up with that. Maybe Marvin Jones is a decent one there, like a veteran, solid guy. Marvin Jones already kind of has an old man game to him anyway, so that should kind of help him well as he actually ages into his 30s here.
And what was interesting was Marvin Jones Jr.'s I guess, participation in the slot this past year. That was a major increase, if I remember correctly. Don't have the numbers in front of me, but he played in the slot a lot, so maybe he could help out the Packers in that sense.
Well, and he's a guy too. He's gotten some money that maybe it's time to try to win a ring. And looking around, and the Packers be a great option for him.
Marvin is the rare player who actually played all 5 years of his contract. There's 5 years of the original contract he signed with the Detroit Lions all those years ago. You never see anyone do that. And I think that just kind of shows he's an underrated, solid guy. Just he's not a great separator, but great uncontested catches. Like I said, kind of that old man game, can feel out zones pretty well. I think he's going to be an underrated signing for some contender. Like you said, Jeff, perfect way to say it. I think he definitely should be looking for a contender at this point.
Yeah, with the way the salary cap's working out, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, some of these guys are going to have to take significant cuts. I mean, you're talking about taking, pay that normally you'd see like the veteran minimum for, some studs. So maybe Marvin Jones Jr. is one of those. But we sit there and we look at some of these hybrid roles like you talked about with Curtis Samuel, Laviska Shenault, Deebo Samuel, similar roles as well, which we brought up earlier in the show. Is this something as to where they are just going to, kind of meander in the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range? Or do you think they actually have potential to jump up and be a wide receiver 1?
I think it just depends on the offense, right? A good coach can unlock these guys, maybe not to the wide receiver 1 level. I mean, wide receiver is just so crowded at this point that, if you're not one of these truly special players, you're probably not cracking that level. I mean, you look at the last few draft classes have brought in such a wealth of good quality players. We expected 2020 to be a good year for wide receivers, and it was. I think it lived up to the hype and maybe even potentially exceeded that hype with CeeDee Lamb, like Justin Jefferson being an absolute superstar right away. Some other guys, of course, we're still waiting on or have shown some pretty decent flashes. 2019 and 2018 were not discussed as those type of classes, but they have already produced like the stars of today and tomorrow. Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, even Deebo Samuel, who you just mentioned. Those guys came from those two classes. Cortland Sutton's a player we've kind of has fallen off the radar at this point, but he had an awesome year last we saw him. Kenny Golladay, who we're talking about, he's from that 2018, or no, he's from 2017. My bad, but But the stars of today and tomorrow have come from those couple of draft classes when we weren't expecting, big time stars to come out of those classes. So to me, I think that wide receivers just almost too crowded for guys, like Deebo Samuel or Laviska Shenault, those type of players to really crack into that area. But I think the trend there between Samuel breaking out in sort of a hybridish role this past year with Joe Brady, that's a good offensive coordinator. Deebo Samuel, good offensive coordinator in San Francisco. The funny thing is, there are guys like this that, not the same type of player, but I look at a guy like Cooper Kupp. Like if Cooper Kupp had gone to some team that they looked at him as he's a big receiver, pretty solid at the catch point, let's make him our X. Let's throw him out our X receiver. I think he would have flopped. I don't think he could play that position at all. So it really is those guys. What if Deebo Samuel didn't end up with Kyle Shanahan? What if he ended up, with some goofball coach that wanted to throw him out there as a true wide receiver? Maybe we wouldn't even be talking about him at this point. It's that is the reality of the NFL. That's just kind of how it works.
Yeah, and I was going
to say, I think you look at the draft, and I know, Chase, you love Kadarius Toney. I feel like that's a guy that we haven't seen a lot of production except for this past year, and there's some questions with drops. And maybe that's a guy that type of role he'd be able to flourish in, scheme up some touches, get him some touches out of the backfield, get him in space, and get him going. That
dude's balance is insane. It is through the roof insane. He doesn't go down, from contact. He's able to generate yards after contact. So he would actually, I was literally thinking the same thing. And he could end up going to the Carolina Panthers maybe in the second, third round, as one of those scheme fit players. And I would absolutely love it. But I would hate it for DJ Moore, who I wish would play a little bit more in the slot so that his involvement would go up and so he could end up capitalizing, because this past year was a nightmare for DJ Moore. This was I mean, the worst role that you could throw DJ Moore in is the role that he was in with Teddy Bridgewater, where he was seeing triple coverage in half the time.
I kind of agree with you that I think as much as Joe Brady did some great stuff for the Panthers, I actually kind of think that Like if I was the Panthers, I would have put Curtis Samuel in the role they had DJ Moore in, and then DJ Moore in that slot receiver. Because I think Samuel's like pretty good as a ball carrier. I think Moore is like one of the best after catch receivers in the NFL, and would be great from the slot. I think that's how you best maximize his skill set. And maybe I don't know. It was a very maybe actually like put Curtis Samuel in Robbie Anderson's role, and then Robbie Anderson in which you had DJ Moore. I don't know. It was a weird wide receiver core that was great. Like I think those guys are all really talented, but it's kind of hard to find exactly where they all fit.
I think DJ Moore probably like sent a text message that he meant to send to like maybe Robbie Anderson or Curtis Samuel. Like, dude, this Joe Brady guy's nuts. Like when they first, showed up, like this guy's whack. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He sent it to Joe Brady, and Joe Brady's like, "Oh, I don't like you. You're going to the outside, bro. You're going to go on the outside. You're going to see triple coverage on every single snap." It's interesting, to see how that's going to play out. But yeah, I like that landing spot for Kadarius Toney, to at least fit into that role and not have a lot of pressure on him to perform right off the bat. Makes plenty of sense. So, Matt, you mentioned tweaking reception perception to account for team schemes, which is something I'm very big on, by the way. We just talked about Deebo Samuel and the scheme fit for Deebo Samuel. I'm huge on scheme fits. So, what did you do with the tweak? And did you think that fantasy players accurately account for team schemes when it comes to drafting wide receivers?
To answer the first question, or the second question to start, no. I think we're actually kind of bad about like consistently identifying good and bad situations. I don't think we're necessarily always the best at that. I think we're overconfident in our ability to project roles and everything like that. Because I think most good coaches are gonna find ways to make it work with good players. And I don't know that we're always great about player evaluation because look, the only way to really evaluate a player is be some kind of psycho that would chart all their routes. Like what kind of idiot would do that? So it takes time and like realistically, we just don't all have that kind of time like to do that for every running back, every quarterback, every tight end, every wide receiver. So and I don't think the league is always good at evaluating guys to be scheme fits. So, when it's right, it's right. I don't necessarily know that we are always the best at it because we also don't have all the information. That's just kind of the way it is being on the outside. Now, in terms of reception perception, I have actually never tweaked the process of charting players. That has been the same since I started doing it since 2014, especially because that's how you keep the data consistent. It's something that this will be the 7th season that I've collected data for, which is wild, but it's also great because to the point I think that you're asking here is, there are things I said based on reception perception like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago that I never would say now because there's so much more data to put the context on. Perfect example, you brought him up. Dante Moncrief. I used to really like Dante Moncrief back in the day. And, I'm looking at his reception perception. I'm like, this is back in 2014, even into 2015. I'm like, this is pretty good stuff. Like, these are good. These are good numbers. Now at this point, I'm like, these are pretty average, like average at best receiver numbers. Not all that excited about it. If a guy put up what Dante Moncrief was putting up in 2014, if like I'm charting a rookie doing that in 2020, like this will probably be a guy who's like, he hangs around the league for a little bit, but I wouldn't be that excited about him. So that's the interesting thing is like with more data, with more context, really is the exciting part of it. I think that's really where reception perception is only getting better is having that data in that context. And I think it's really not an issue with the process. It's an issue with anyone interpreting it, myself included, at that point. So but I do think the one thing that I've gotten better about using from like a scheme standpoint with reception perception is emphasizing deployment. There's really no point in comparing a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster to a guy like Antonio Brown, like back in the day, in 2018, when those guys were functioning so well together, it's like they're playing almost completely different positions, not just because AB, is a future Hall of Famer, one of the 5 best receivers to ever do it. And obviously he's getting a lot of extra defensive attention, whatever. But also like Juju's operating from the inside. He doesn't see a lot of press coverage, doesn't see a lot of man coverage. He runs against a lot of zones while AB's out there as the top X receiver, getting top cover corners, pressing him on the line of scrimmage a ton. And I think that's where I've gotten better about being like, okay, look at Juju's results and compare them to other slot receivers in the NFL. And I was like, hell yeah, Juju's better than like Julian Edelman Edelman's had a great career, but like better than Golden Tate or better than Jamison Crowder or like those slot receivers. And yeah, Juju's a different build, but the way he's deployed and the way that comes out in reception perception is much more important than comparing Juju to other outside receivers, because that's not what he's asked to do.
No, and it's such an important part to, your analysis as a whole when it comes to press coverage, when it comes to giving a cushion, because certain players, like you sit there and look at it. I'm trying to think of who I was researching the other day, but I mean, he almost never saw press coverage. Like he was sitting there and he had about 2 yards or 2 to 4 yards, somewhere in that range of cushion on almost every snap because he didn't want to get beat deep. So they were actually able to utilize him in more of a slant route. So his air yards per target were a lot lower than what they were the year before, because the year before he's just running go routes the entire time. So it's very interesting to see, how that actually applies. Now, we did have another question from the chat real quick. And for those of you who are, new in here, who weren't listening at the beginning, he wants to know, where is he going to be able to find your work this year?
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about where are we going to find reception perception this year. All I can say for right now is stay tuned. Very, very soon will we be able to talk about this. Less than a week. Less than a week we'll be talking about where this is going to be this year and going forward. So be excited. It's going to be awesome. No longer a part of any other draft guides, any other draft kits. So we'll talk about that more then.
Make sure you turn on your Twitter notifications.
Yeah, basically what I'm saying is go to Twitter, go to @MattHarmon_BYB, put on the notifications, maybe suffer through some bad weekend tweets. Saturday I might tip a few back. I don't know. Who's to say? Like you might have to live with some junk there, but I probably won't be tweeting through that like at this point in my life. But just what I'm saying is just wait. And you'll get a good notification at some point if you're that good.
I love it. All right, so last week we had your uncle. We had your uncle on the show. He told me to make sure I mentioned that. Matt Waldman, of course. And we discussed some fake stats for receivers that are coming out of the draft. And, things that really shouldn't be paid attention to, very similar to how you just mentioned with drops. So are there any misleading stats, that you sit there and you see coming across Twitter and you're like, that's just ridiculous. Like you don't need to pay attention to that. Or, maybe some analysis, whatever the case is, because everybody has their own little thing where they're like, that doesn't apply.
Yeah. Well, first let me say, I don't think any one stat is like the skeleton key of evaluating a player. And that's including, reception perception, right? Because there's a lot of other variables that go into a player beyond just how often they get open. So let me put that disclaimer out first before I say what I say next, which is basically like what stat is fake news. Just about all like traditional counting stats for wide receivers, which is literally why I do what I do. And let's take college evaluation out of it for a second, because I think draft prospecting is really difficult. And I think there's actually a lot of utility to using production metrics, breakout age, that type of stuff. I think there's some value to that, to weeding out, outliers and then bringing in film evaluation into that. So take that out of it for a second. But throwing out, average depth of target, that's quarterback influenced. Yards per target, quarterback influenced. Offense influenced. Play caller influenced. Role influenced. Catch rate. Everything like that. Yards per reception, just straight up yards, touchdowns, all like that. A wide receiver is the most dependent position on the offense, on other things going right for them to do anything in a stat sheet perspective. That was why I was sitting there in 2014 being like, somebody's got to try to isolate wide receiver play from all these other factors. The only thing that a wide receiver can control is obviously, is the ball going to come to you, you got to catch it. But like, are you able to run good routes, get open, and present a reasonable target to the quarterback? That's good wide receiver play. Everything else, it's dependent on the quarterback. It's dependent on the offensive environment. It's dependent on the offensive line giving that quarterback enough time to get them the ball. So, like, what stat do I think is I don't know, like fake for the player evaluation? All of them, and that's
independently.
That is definitely me being radicalized by just watching so many routes over the years. So take that, with a grain of salt if you feel it's necessary. But at the same time, I would just say that, player evaluation, the more and more you put into time, like watching these guys, I think that's where you find the truth of what they do well. It's as simple as a guy like a Nelson Aguilar who goes from one quarterback to the other and his average depth of target swings. And it doesn't mean he could never run deep routes when he's in Philadelphia. He just wasn't asked to do it or whatever. So I don't know. I think that is my hyper radicalized answer to that question. When it comes to prospecting, I do think it's different because I think there's a lot of like, it's just it's a different environment. Like once you get to the NFL and you're on the field, like I think we can judge you all from an equal perspective. I'm much less bullish on just watch the tape, just trust the tape. When it comes to actually watching college players.
No, it's
college. So I was going to say, I'm a Devy guy. I love college, and it's so hard for statistical analysis because, like, I'm a Ohio State fan. I know when J.K. Dobbins was coming out, he didn't touch the ball the second half of games, the entire season long. You're winning in blowouts, or you watch a Big 12 game and it's back and forth. And so to just look at raw stats with college players is very, very hard to do.
Yeah, and to your point, a huge aspect of this is the Pittsburgh, Steelers this past year. And we also saw, how I guess Juju was affected by not having a running back or a healthy running back. And the whole offense, or the offense as a whole, I should say. So sitting there and looking at it, he had 97 receptions to 831 yards, 9 touchdowns. I mean, he was completely affected by the movement of the game and how they didn't have a running back and how they couldn't, gain yards on first down essentially. So they started using him as a running back, but in short yardage situations, he was just getting the ball thrown to him versus running. I don't think I've ever seen a stat line. You get 100 receptions for 800 yards. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's like a running back stat line. There were some games where he had 7 catches for 28 yards. Like that's literally that's like a running back line, like a third down back or something like that. Yeah. I think the Pittsburgh offense, it's like, wow, I can't believe Deontay Johnson has such a low yards per target. They all have low yards per target because the quarterback is not getting the ball downfield because for whatever reason, he doesn't want to hold on to the ball. He doesn't want to get hit, whatever it was. Like that stuff to me, it can swing wildly year to year because of everything else that's going on around the wide receiver. And yeah, Juju's a great example. Like his efficiency numbers look a lot different from 2018 to now. Those are two drastically different offensive environments. And that's kind of what the point of this all is, basically.
He went an entire year without having a 100-yard game. And that's nuts to me. You have 97 receptions and you don't have a single 100-yard game. All right, So back to the show sheet. Let's see. Yahoo, right? They've been crushing faces. Like they went into DFS this past year. They've been expanding like crazy. Obviously, you're part of that team. So do you ever think that they're going to get into Devy type stuff, or are they going to just, hit on what they have now? And if so, are you going to get involved in the Devy at all?
Me, probably not. But in terms of Yahoo, I don't know. Maybe there's just so much focus right now, industry wide, on betting, and I know from a company perspective, I know there's a lot of that focus as well. I'll basically just be here to take my marching orders when the time comes. Basically, when it comes to these things. So I would say that right now is the biggest focus from our company perspective, and pretty much everywhere else, it's like, how do we get into the betting space? And we could have a larger conversation about how you feel about that. I sometimes, just to be honest, I sometimes think it's weird. Like, all right, we want to do all this betting content when like people from 10 states or something, yes. I don't know, I don't even know, 10, something like that, can read it. That seems weird. Or read it and care. I don't know. It's that is where I think things are heading. Maybe not necessarily to the Debbie world, but we'll see. You never know.
Jeff wants to apply if Yahoo starts to Debbie. That's pretty much why he had me ask this question.
I will gladly cede all of that work to Jeff. That's my promise to you. Yeah.
I was just thinking we see the changing landscape in college football with player compensation becoming a bigger issue, and we know how much money is involved in college football. Not so much maybe a Debbie league, and some of these leagues get really deep, but just unlocking being able to play college football fantasy, and if Yahoo would be a platform for that once people are a little bit more comfortable. So.
I hope so, because. And I hope some of it goes back to the players. Basically, is all I care about. Like,
yes.
I don't know. The whole thing is ridiculous.
Yes.
All right, so we're getting close. We got about 10 minutes left or so, and we wanted to get personal because you had an excellent show. You had an excellent show the other day with, I believe it was Casey Kasem, right? Where she had to ask some personal questions. So we wanted to dive a little bit into that, see how personal we get. We'll just start off with, I don't know, Jeff, where you found these questions, but. Cooking is a passion. How did it start, and what are your favorite dishes?
Yeah, hey, Jeff clearly is a follower on Instagram. That's how he knows. I don't tweet as many food pics anymore. But yeah, no, I love to cook. Like, we were talking about this before, Jeff. About how for you the break from the stack of accounting paperwork,
yes,
is to come on here and talk about drops and Deontay Johnson. My break from watching Deontay Johnson routes is getting in the kitchen and cooking. That's where I find like my passion, my release. I would say that it started when I started to lose weight and get in shape. Like, people always ask me, it's my pinned tweet, the article people can find on my old blog, sort of chronicling the early stages of me losing 100 pounds. People always ask me like, what can I do to lose weight? Most important thing to me, maybe not the most important, but very important for me, my perspective is like, learn to cook and learn to love it, because it's just going to help you so much along the way. And for me, that's kind of where it started. And then just really wanting to challenge yourself, because, you get on, whether it's YouTube or TikTok. Like, I remember when TikTok first came out, I was like, I'm not watching that crap. Like, I'm not watching these kids dancing around. My fiance is like texting me all these friggin' TikToks that I'm not watching that, not funny. And she still doesn't. They're still not funny. Our For You pages are very different. But I did eventually get on the app, and like, I love it. I love like the 60-second cooking videos. Like I said, my whole feed is basically, DIY projects, cooking, like fitness stuff. Hers is like, I don't know, people reenacting scenes from Harry Potter and other anime, like some anime stuff. I don't know, totally different experiences, but that's actually why I think it's a pretty cool platform. So, you seeing other people do stuff like that, it's like, oh, I want to do that. I want to challenge myself. In terms of what are like my favorite things to cook, definitely any like big, meat dish for sure. Love to make wings. I think I've perfected a slow cooked wing recipe for sure. Getting like the smoker involved. Hey, look at that. There we go. Get anything out on the smoker, grill, whatever, for sure. But like, love to cook breakfast food. Big fan of breakfast food. So yeah, I will literally almost like try my hand at anything. But yeah, I don't know. Normally most nights I keep it pretty healthy, keep it pretty reasonable. Right now I'm like in a pretty strict cutting phase. So I'm not having as much fun with food right now. Let's put it that way.
Oh, so you can't go out and just go make a nice juicy steak right now and shout out.
I mean, I will save that for like Saturday. It's like one day a week sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm still outing it with everything else. Chase, come on, man, get that out.
Using him, Chase, come on.
Oh,
I gotta eat like salmon, or I gotta eat salmon tonight. Give me.
I love salmon. I actually had salmon last night. I love cooking, so
nice.
Big fan of that. I like seafood dishes.
Smoking, so I need to try that out. I need to maybe follow Matt a little bit more on Instagram and figure out how to smoke some meat.
We actually
it's fun.
Our group chat was really big on cooking for a little bit there. Anyways, we have a game we want to play, which Jeff set up for us, and it's called "Which Receivers Come to Mind with These Names?" And since you're such a big Star Wars fan, he decided to plug in Star Wars characters for you to compare to these wide receivers. Oh man, I don't know if you had the show sheet up or not, but
I do. I wish I had prepped for, but I'm going to try to think about it on the fly.
Oh man, I'll try and take my time and kind of explain it as we go. I saw this and I was like, Jeff, what the hell is happening right now? I was like, I know he's a Star Wars fan. He was a Star Wars fan as a kid. Like, he probably still likes it now, but he could be able to.
Oh no, I'm still.
Maybe. Yeah.
I just finished the last season of Clone Wars, the animated show, a couple of days ago. Yeah.
And you said your wife has the anime on her stuff. Come on. All right,
listen. Relax, Chase. Relax.
Just saying. All right, so the first one up is Luke Skywalker. Are you ready for this? Which receiver reminds you of Luke Skywalker?
Yeah, I think when you think about Luke Skywalker, kind of unheralded beginnings, didn't really get off to, he wasn't a guy that many expected growing up. I mean, unless you knew what he was to become, of course, then you would know, what was going to happen with him. But, unheralded guy who went through some tribulation too, obviously gets his freaking hand cut off at one point. I'm not going to say that this wide receiver went through hand cutting off sort of tribulation, but this is a guy who eventually became the best in the business, did Luke Skywalker, obviously. And I think Stefon Diggs has gone from an unheralded background as a day 3 draft pick, went through some tribulation at the end of his time in Minnesota to become a clear top 5 wide receiver, reception perception stud forever. I think Luke Skywalker, Stefon Diggs, basically the same thing.
I love that.
Fantastic.
I had no idea where you're going with that. I was sitting there, I was thinking maybe Cooper Kupp. Like, where is he going with this one?
Oh God, not Cooper Kupp.
No, because he fell out real quick. But All right, so our next one, we got Han Solo. Who does Han Solo remind you of?
Yeah, Han Solo, renegade, badass type, right? We're talking about a player that. We're talking about a character. We're talking about a character that is really, special, right? Everyone loves him. How can you not love Han Solo? Like, what kind of sicko would you be if you didn't like Han Solo? That would be. We would really have to ask some questions about you as a person. Literally every performance. In every category, he knocks it out of the park. Whether you want him to be that sort of emotional heartthrob, you eventually get those moments with him. Obviously, again, he's a hunk. He's a stud. He checks every box. Everyone agrees he rocks. Who doesn't agree that Chris Godwin rocks? A guy who has no weaknesses in his game. A player who the stats crew love. The film crew love. If you don't love Chris Godwin, you're the problem. If you don't love Han Solo, you're the problem.
I like it. And I love Chris Godwin. He was actually, up until he got tagged, he was my Dynasty wide receiver 2. He just dropped down to Dynasty wide receiver 4. But
big drop.
Yep, it's a huge drop, astronomical drop. I know.
Cool.
Actually, maybe it was 5, but either way, Stephon Diggs, I believe, is above him now, who is Luke Skywalker. All right, so we got our next character, Chewbacca. Who's your Chewie? Jeff.
Chewbacca makes a lot of noise. Always kind of chirping a little bit, right? Obviously, he just can't control himself. It's like one of those things like, Chewie, come on, control yourself. Like, stop screaming, okay? There's a lot of times when this player pops on the internet, I'm kind of like, can you stop? Like, come on, man. No one needs this right now. You keep him you got to keep him kind of in a pretty limited role, right? Like, you can't ask, or let's just say he's been put in a bit of a box if you want to be generous to the player that we're going to talk about in a minute. But, you're not asking Chewbacca to do everything, right? Like, he's going to fly the ship. He could put C-3PO on his back. He could do some of that stuff. But, there are certain things that Chewbacca's you're not going to ask him to do. Mike Thomas is a guy, he's just basically asked to run slant routes, but he really hates that, though. He hates that. He wants to be asked to do more. I think Chewie wants to do more than just scream. Let me fly the ship. Let me be the everything man for you. But man, it would be nice if Chewie could keep it down every now and again. We don't need all the screaming, and it would be nice if Michael Thomas could log off every now and again and don't get in a Twitter fight every few weeks. That'd be nice.
See, I totally thought you were going to go the way of the bigger, more physical target, but I love that you went personality instead.
That was great.
I was going to say Colin Johnson, but All right, we got.
I mean, you can't say Chewbacca's Calvin Johnson.
No, Colin Johnson.
Oh. Well, I mean, you can't put him that low either.
No, I'm just.
Chewie's a star. Come on.
Oh man! All right, what about Darth Vader? Give me your Darth Vader.
My God, it's Odell Beckham. It's got to be because kind of an anti-hero. Definitely has his annoying moments, just like Anakin Skywalker in the prequels. It's like, oh God, man, we get it. Like, you're the chosen one, but can you just stop with the angst every now and again? Like, keep your robes covered up when you're around Padme, please. Like, we can all see what's going on. We can see how you feel about her. We get it, but relax. There are many times you're with Odell and you're like, hey, bro, like, relax. All right. That will be enough. Please. But, oh my God, what the hell am I talking about? But yeah, Odell definitely a guy that, I'm still rooting for him to figure it out. And even until the end with Darth, you're like always holding out hope that he's going to figure it out. And he did, right? He chucks the Emperor down the shaft. A spoiler alert, that apparently didn't get rid of him. Sorry about that if you haven't seen the most recent movie. If you haven't at this point, I don't really actually care about your feelings. But yeah, that's the way I would go with it. Darth has definitely got to be OBJ.
Dude, I mean, Matt Donnelly's over here. He's like, Darth doesn't take crap from anybody. OBJ.
Yeah, I mean,
well,
this is a family show.
We're going to leave it at that. All right. Oh, man. All right. Last but not least, we have Baby Yoda. Who is your Baby Yoda?
I mean, Baby Yoda, obviously. Baby Yoda, I think Baby Yoda is actually Calvin Johnson because, look, size difference, right? Huge. But, Calvin Johnson was literally everything he was hyped up to be. Like, he was a guy that it's like, this is a superstar. This is, the next great thing. I was actually going to say even like a Julio Jones type, but I think Calvin Johnson makes more sense, and I'll get there. Stay on track, Harmon. Baby Yoda was like this instant hype machine, and you just wondered, would he keep delivering? But my God, it's been 2 seasons of The Mandalorian so far, and it still hits. Like, hang on a second. He's, every time he pops up on screen.
Oh my God.
Every time he pops up on screen, it's electric. He's always got something for the folks. He's always got. Don't make me look like an idiot. Come on. Every time he does that, it's like it's electric. Every time Calvin Johnson did something, it was electric. It continued to hit. All right, That will be enough. My dogs
I know, it's getting weird.
Yeah, I know. My dogs hate this, by the way. Like, I'm surprised neither one of them has broken the door down.
We got a question from the chat too.
At the same time, hang on. Eric, relax.
Yeah.
I'm almost done here, and I got freaking Baby Yoda keep yapping at me. But the thing with Calvin Johnson was just he went away so fast, and like now he's just gone. And at the end of the most recent season of The Mandalorian, turn this thing off. It's like, what's going to happen to him? What happens next? We don't know. I hope he's not just gone from Mando's life forever. He's sleeping now.
Is this like a Furby? Is this the same thing as a Furby? Because it feels really reminiscent of a Furby where you're like, dude, all right, stop.
Probably. Oh, no. Yep. See, one of the dogs heard it. They're coming in the door. All right. Shows a disaster.
Oh, it's awesome.
The rails. I got involved and it went off the rails.
All right. So, who's the Jar Jar Binks?
Oh, my God. Jar Jar Binks, I don't know. Who do you guys think is just like the stone worst wide receiver that you just want to go away and kind of ruin things?
You know who's Jar Jar Binks? Juju Smith-Schuster. You know,
no.
He's not a star, obviously. He's dancing on the logo, and you just want him to play. And I hate to do it to him, but that's my Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar Juju. I mean, come on. I'm
not like a massive Juju fan at all. I think I've been dead right about Juju as a player all along. Sidebar. But I mean, come on, bro. Like Jar Jar he has no good moments, no good redeeming qualities. Every time, like I just said, I just wrapped up Clone Wars. Like every time there's a 3-episode Jar Jar Binks arc, I'm like, great. Well, here's 60 minutes of my life I'm just never gonna get back that I don't care about. And Juju's had good moments. He's done good things.
I have a player, but it's not a wide receiver. It's actually a tight end. That's Evan Ingram.
I was gonna say that's like all of them.
No, but all of them. Evan Ingram, who drops every single pass to him. He completely destroys drives. He sits there and he stalls out on the offense. You get a big play from him, right? Like randomly, and then it's done. Who do you got?
I got it. Demarcus Robinson from the Chiefs. It's like every time it's just like, why are you here? We've got Tyreek, we've got Kelsey. People want like McCole Hardman to be a thing, but no, it's like every time Sammy Watkins gets hurt, it's like, well, you're right. Let's see what McCole. I'm not like a huge McCole Hardman fan, but just for the sake of the argument, it's like, this is it. This is where Hardman's the guy, and I'm not saying he's bad, Hardman. I haven't decided yet how I feel, but it's like, oh no, then Demarcus Robinson is there, and it's just not good.
And then we have the Jar Jar conspiracy theories, which I've actually looked into, that Jar Jar is actually a Jedi Master.
Yeah. I'm out on those.
He's a Sith. Right. Darth Jar Jar.
That's what it is. All right, so let's go ahead and let's end this episode because we're already 7 minutes past. But what advice would you have for people starting in the industry? I'm a big believer in trying to help out the new people, trying to get the new people into the industry. I actually just made an actual page public on fantasyintervention.com as to where you can go on there and get our writing standards. Because I added all the articles, you can get our writing standards, everything that you need to know about writing, all the terminology, the stylistic approach. We also have some new sites like Dynasty Vipers and whatnot that are looking for new writers that can train new writers. They actually have their own page along with 4 other companies, and actually do a show, How to Start a Podcast, which isn't just about podcasts, it's about getting into the fantasy football industry as a whole on Fridays at 12 o'clock noon, by the way. So what kind of advice do you have for new writers or for new people getting into the industry?
My biggest piece of advice, and it is, obviously like a personal bias for me, but it's be different, stand out, like like I said, 6-7 years ago, I asked myself the question, what's the one thing about football that I feel like I want to know? And I feel like it is a question that I have about the game that no one else is asking, or people might be asking, but no one else is answering to a satisfactory degree. For me, that was, what the hell are wide receivers doing on all these plays where on Sunday they just run off the field, right? Because a wide receiver is lucky to get 10 targets in a game. but they might run like 30, 40 routes. Let's evaluate the wide receiver in totality in that way. So that for reception perception, which brought me to NFL Network, to Yahoo, to reception perception being in the Fantasy Footballers Draft Kit, to everything else that's going to come along the way. It was that asking the initial question of what's a question I have about the game that no one else is answering. Well, I'm going to be the one to answer that. There's probably not that many questions available for everyone to have something to answer, but basically what you got to do, you got to stand out. You have to be doing something different. If you want to ask a question, it's why should someone listen to you? Why are you different than everybody else out there that's making fantasy content? There's a lot of people making content, but why should people follow yours? What do you bring that's different to the table? I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can have. And then just in general, like interact with people. Be don't be a jerk. Be cool to each other. Like if people, bring folks on your show, go on other people's show. Like don't turn down opportunities to network with folks, and don't do it in a way that's like strategic, because people can see that, and no one likes that. No one likes to feel like, oh, this guy is just strategically using me or whatever, but like just do it for the relationship, and then good things come out of there. So that's kind of I know those are very generic. I don't have Chase. No, I love that you've got like a thing on the website of like, here's how to be good at this thing, right? Like that people need that. For me, it's those are two kind of more holistic things. It's, stand out in a very crowded space, be different, answer that question that you want asked about football. And most importantly, be kind, be giving with your time, and make those relationships, not for strategic reasons, but just for the joy of communing with others.
No, absolutely. Open yourself up, take advantage of every opportunity. Never say no. Essentially, that's the way I was raised. That's the way that I believe business operates is, hey, just don't say no. Just say yes to every opportunity that you have. Love that. And we appreciate you for coming on the show. Jeff, do you have anything else to add before we do our sign-offs?
No, I just want to say thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate that advice and certainly take it to heart. And I think anybody listening should do the same thing. So thank you.
I love it. Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Yep, absolutely love it. 100%. Thank you for coming on. Matt, do you want to let everybody else know where to find you one more time and where to find your perception? Because that's a big topic right now.
Yeah. Find me on Twitter at @MattHarmon_BYB. Remember, turn those notifications on, deal with all the crappy tweets that are going to come over the weekend or whatever. And maybe just keep it tuned to the hashtag reception perception. Might be the easiest thing to do. But I really appreciate you guys having me on. This was a great discussion. I actually had a huge blast with the Star Wars one. This was awesome. Well done, Jeff. That was a great set of questions. Yeah, thank you guys for having me and Baby Yoda. I bet you didn't think you were getting an actual celebrity appearance in the youngest.
How many followers does Baby Yoda have? You woke it up. The Furby's alive. I mean, Baby Yoda's alive.
I mean, not wrong.
Jeff, where can we find you?
Twitter, of course, for whom J Bell tolls. Work with Fantasy Pros, work with Fantasy Intervention, join our circle _, and work with Going for Two. So a little bit all over the place, and I'm certainly happy to hop on any availability, and I'm here.
And you guys can find our content at join our circle _. Once again, that's join our circle _ fantasyintervention.com. youtube.com/fantasyintervention. You can find me personally at ff_intervention. I'm also working with kids that have special needs and teach them how to play fantasy football. We're going to start that back up very shortly here. You guys can find my site at Some Yards. It's Some Yards Better Than No Yards, which is an old term from Madden back in the day. So it's something that I enjoy doing very much. For started back up. So go follow at Some Yards, and you'll have some time. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you all for letting us interview fantasy football life. We're out.